Aloan was not supposed to be within 30 paces of the sand, and yet here she stood at its very edge, a pitcher of watered wine going warm in her hands, close enough to smell the blood that had already soaked into the ground that morning. The proving did that to a place. 12,000 wolves packed the tiered stone of the Grey Spire arena, rank upon rank of them rising into the pale morning light, and every last one of them wanted the same thing, and wanting made a scent all its own. She had learned long ago not to breathe too deeply in crowds. When she did, the wanting came in on the air and settled behind her ribs like something swallowed, and she had to remind herself, over and over, patiently, that none of it belonged to her. That was the part no one knew. The part that would cost her her life, if they ever learned it. She could stand in a sea of strangers and feel each of them from the inside, their small cruelties and smaller fears. And she had spent every year since her 6th learning to wear a face that felt nothing. She wore it now. It had never once failed her. It was about to. When the high-borne box above her went suddenly quiet, she felt the reason before she heard it. A cold, amused cruelty, uncoiling somewhere over her head and sharpening itself to a point. She knew, in the way that only she could know, that it was about to be aimed at her, and there was nowhere to go, because a maid did not simply walk away from the crown's own gallery. So she stood, and she waited for it, and she looked up. Varian, heir to the throne of Duskmare, was looking down at her. "You," he said. And the whole box turned to see who the prince had deigned to notice. "Girl, you have been staring at the sand all morning, like a starved thing at a feast." He smiled. It was a beautiful smile on a beautiful face, with nothing behind it. "Do you fancy yourself a fighter?" Aloan lowered her eyes, the way a maid was meant to. "No, my prince. No," he agreed, "of course not." "You are rankless, are you not? A wolf who cannot even wolf." A ripple of laughter moved through the box, obedient and cruel. "Tell me, does it feel like being dead? Being the one creature in all of Duskmere too broken to shift?" She said nothing. She had trained 21 years for exactly this, to stand still, while men like Varian opened her up for their amusement, and she was very good at it, but the tonic was thinning in her blood. She had taken her last careful measure before dawn, rationing what little remained, and without its dulling weight, she could feel him from the inside now, could feel his pleasure at her silence, could feel him deciding to press harder precisely because a silent victim was no sport. She kept her breathing shallow. She kept her eyes on the sand. She thought, the way she had taught herself to think, of nothing, of nothing, of nothing. That was when the other man spoke. "Leave her, Varian." The voice was low and rough, and carried without any effort, and it belonged to the man, standing a single step behind the prince's shoulder, broad through the chest, dark-haired, with a soldier's terrible stillness in him. Aloan knew him by sight, as everyone in Greyspire did. Torin, Beta of Dustmere, commander of the Alpha King's Guard, 4 times champion of the Proving. No wolf had beaten him in 9 years. It was widely agreed that no wolf ever would. "I am bored, cousin," Varian said. "Amuse me. You are the great fighter. What would you give her? A lesson?" And Torin, who should simply have turned away, who Aloan would lie awake afterward, trying to understand, looked down at the rankless maid at the edge of his arena and made the single careless mistake that would break both of their lives. "I will give her better than a lesson," he said. And there was a champion's laziness in it, the ease of a man who has never once in his life been made to pay for his words. "Beat me at the Proving, Maid, and I will marry you." The box roared. He lifted his voice over the laughter, playing to it now, grinning down at her. "You have my word before the crown. Best me on the sand, and I will take you to wife, rank and all, Beta's mate, Lady of Greyspire. Anything less than that, and you go back to your buckets and never lift your eyes to my arena again." The laughter climbed and climbed. And below the tears, the challenge bell began to toll, the way it did whenever a wager was cried before the king. because the oldest law of the proving required an answer while the bronze still rang. 3 tolls. A challenge left unanswered by the third was a challenge withdrawn. And there was no shame in it, and every soul in that arena expected the little maid to drop her eyes and let the bell ring itself back down into silence, and let the great men have their laugh. The first toll went out across the sand, slow and enormous. Eloin looked up at Torin, and for one moment, one only, with the tonic worn thin enough to let it through, she felt what lived underneath the grin. Not cruelty, the way cruelty lived in Varian, bright and cold and pleased with itself. Something else. Something tired and cornered, and very old. A man performing a part he had performed so long that he had forgotten there had ever been another part to play. It surprised her so completely that she nearly missed the second toll. She thought of her brother. She thought of Emrys, 11 years old, in a stone cell somewhere beneath this very city, condemned to die, the morning after this proving ended, for a crime that had been hers and never his. She thought of the champion's boon, the single mercy the winner could claim from the king's own hand that even a king was bound by 400 years of law to grant. She had lied and scrubbed and half-starved her way into a maid's post inside these walls for exactly one reason. Not to carry wine, to stand close enough to the sand to bleed onto it, if bleeding was what it took. The bell drew its breath for the third toll. Deal, Eloin said. The arena did not fall silent all at once. It fell silent, the way a wave draws back from a shore, the nearest ranks first, then the ones behind, the word running outward faster than sound had any right to. She answered. The maid answered. The maid said, deal, until 12,000 wolves sat staring at a girl holding a pitcher of warm wine. And a third toll rang out over every one of them, and could not, by any law in the realm, be taken back. Up in the box, the grin had gone from Torin's face. He was not looking at the crowd anymore. He was looking at her, only at her, and Eloin, with her mask worn down to nothing, felt his easy amusement curdle into something she had not expected. Not anger, not even surprise, not really, dread. She held his gaze and let him see none of what she was, and she thought, with a calm that frightened her more than any of Varian's cruelty, she had not come to the proving to serve wine. She had come to buy a life, and she had just staked it in front of the whole roaring world on a man who had never in 9 years once lost. By nightfall, all of Greyspire agreed on exactly how the matter would end. A drunken wager cried, in sport, was no true challenge. Everyone said. The king would laugh it off. The maid would be sent back to the scullery, with a bruise on her pride. And by the next dawn, the whole business would be nothing more than a jest. The highborn traded over their wine. These things did not bind. Everyone knew that. Everyone was wrong. Eloin learned it the way she learned most things in that place, by standing silent against a wall, while men who mattered decided her life a few feet away. She had been collected by 2 guardsmen and marched to the king's council chamber and left beside the door like a lamp carried in and forgotten. King Aldrich sat at the head of the long table, gray at the temples, unreadable. A man who had held a hard throne through 2 wars, precisely by knowing which laws to remember and which to quietly let sleep. Torin stood before him. And Varian lounged in a chair with his boots up on the table, delighted with the chaos he had made, and paying, as always, no price for it. It was sport, Majesty, Torin was saying, and Eloin could hear the strain under the flat soldier's calm of it. A jest that ran long. I am asking you to strike it from the rolls and let the girl go back to her post unharmed. The fault is mine. Let the cost be mine as well. You cried a marriage wager before the crown, Aldrich said mildly. During the sacred proving, over open sand, and the challenge bell tolled 3 times unanswered by any withdrawal. He turned a heavy ring slowly around one finger. Tell me, Beta, in 400 years of the proving, when has a wager sealed by the 3rd toll ever once been struck from the rolls? Silence. Never. The king answered himself. not one time. The proving is the single law in this realm that no crown may bend, because the day a king bends it is the day the strong stop believing the sand is honest, and a pack that no longer believes the sand is honest tears itself to pieces inside of a season. He looked for the first time directly at Eloin, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a hand pressed flat against her chest. The girl answered. The bell rang. It is bound she fights, or she forfeits. And you know, as well as I do, what the law asks of a challenger who forfeits a sworn wager. Eloin did know. She had read every word of the proving's law before she ever set foot inside these walls, because she did nothing, ever, without first reading what it might cost her. A challenger who swore a wager and then refused the sand did not go home to her buckets. She surrendered herself in body and service to the one she had challenged. For the length of that one's life, there was no walking away. That door had swung shut the instant she said deal, and some cold, planning part of her had known it would. Then it is settled, Varian said cheerfully, swinging his boots down. She fights. She dies in the first round against whatever brute the lots hand her. Or she limps to the last round and dies against you, cousin, and either way, the whole realm has a wonderful week of it. He rose, crossed the room, clapped Torin on the shoulder, hard enough to rock a smaller man on his feet, and strolled out humming a wedding tune under his breath. Aldrich dismissed the rest of them with a flick of 2 fingers. Eloin turned to go. Girl! She stopped. The king studied her for a long moment, and Eloin kept her face empty and her breathing flat, and prayed the last of the tonic held, because a man who had kept a hard throne through 2 wars had not done it by being easy to deceive. You are not afraid, Aldrich said slowly. I have condemned men in this very room who wept, and men who raged, and men who begged. I have never once had a one of them simply stand there and let me finish speaking. A pause, delicate as a blade laid against skin. What are you? A maid, Majesty, Eloin said. Only frightened, past the point of weeping. He did not believe her. She could feel, quite clearly, that he did not believe her. But he was a busy man with a hard throne, and a rankless girl was a small thing, and after a moment he waved her out, and she lived 1 more hour. Torin caught up to her in the cold stone corridor beyond the chamber. Wait. He came around in front of her, and this close. He was larger than he had seemed, even up above the sand, and there was no arrogance left anywhere in him now. Listen to me. There is no path through this that ends with you alive, on that sand. Do you understand me? You are not a fighter. In the first round you will be drawn against a shifted wolf twice your weight, and I will be nowhere I can reach you. His jaw worked. So here's what we will do. You will lose the first bout cleanly, on purpose. Take a fall. Yield the moment they call first blood. The law is satisfied, the wager is spent, and you walk free. And whatever it truly is you came here to win. And his dark eyes moved over her face, searching. Come to me after, quietly, and I will hear it. I owe you that much. I suspect I owe you a great deal more than that. It was the kindest thing anyone had offered Eloin in years, and it was worthless to her, and she nearly laughed aloud at the cruelty of it. I cannot yield, she said. You will die, perhaps. She met his eyes, and for the space of a single breath, she let herself feel him again, that same cornered weariness from the box, and over it now a raw, baffled guilt that his own careless jest had put a girl in front of a monster. It was not the heart of a cruel man. She filed it away, because she could not yet afford to trust it, and because some traitor part of her already wanted to. But I did not come here to lose the first round, Beta. I came here to win the last one. She stepped around him. You had best hope you are every bit as good as they say you are. You are going to need to be. Torin did not move to stop her. But, as she passed him, close, in the narrow dark of the corridor, she saw his nostrils flare, the old reflex of a wolf catching a scent that does not fit its picture of the world. For half a heartbeat, underneath the flat, dull smell of a palace maid, he caught something else, something far older, something the tonic had been thinning all day and could no longer hold down. Then it was gone, and she was walking away from him, and he was left standing alone in the empty corridor, with a puzzle sitting in his lungs. Torin was a man who forgot nothing, and he did not forget that. The proving ran 4 rounds, and Aloan had 3 doses of tonic left in a cracked green vial she wore on a cord against her heart, and 1 small brother who would die at first light on the morning after the final. She did the arithmetic in the dark of her narrow cell that first night, the way she would every night after, and every night it came out the same. And every night she checked it again, because hope is a thing you have to keep counting. 4 rounds, 1 opponent a day. Survive each, and on the last day she would face the champion himself. And if she beat the man no wolf had beaten in 9 years, she would stand before the king and claim her boon, and walk out through the grey spire gates with Emrys's life folded safe in her hands. Lose a single round before that, and it was finished, and so was he, and she could not simply fight, either. That was the thought that turned her stomach as she lay counting in the dark. She could win, she truly believed it, because the Moonless did not need to be the stronger wolf, nor the faster. They needed only to know a half-breath before their enemy knew it himself, exactly where he meant to go. But the tonic that let her pass as a harmless, rankless nothing was the same tonic that dulled the one gift she needed to survive the sand, drink enough to hide. And she went in blind and slow and dead before the first bell. Drink little enough to stay sharp, and her true scent rose off her skin like smoke off a banked fire. And in an arena packed with wolves, there would be one nose keen enough to name it. The mask and the blade were poured from the same cup, and she could not drink from both at once. She had known all of this before she ever came. She had simply not known, until that corridor, that the single sharpest nose in all of Duskmere would turn out to belong to the one man she was now bound to. She did not sleep. It was the second evening, after the drawing of the lots and before the first round at dawn, that a steward came to her cell and told her stone-faced of the thing she had never once thought to dread. When a wager bound 2 challengers to one another, the ancient law of the proving set them the champion's vigil, a watch to be kept together, alone, each night from moonrise, in the champion's own chambers. It was old and hath forgotten, and no one had invoked it in a generation, and Varian, she was certain, had gone digging it out of the rolls, because it was exactly his flavor of cruelty. To make the maid sit the long nights across a fire from the man who would soon have to kill her, Torrent's chambers were warmer than anywhere Elowen had ever slept, and that was its own quiet insult. A deep fire, soft chairs, shelves of books. He was standing by the tall window when the steward brought her in and shut the door, and for a long while neither of them said anything. "You do not have to speak to me," he said at last, without turning. "The law says we sit the vigil. It does not say we pretend to be friends." He gestured at the far chair, the one nearest the door, as though he understood she would want the door at her back. "Sit, rest. You fight at dawn." She was careful about it. Moonrise had come, and the moon pulled at the Moonless, the way the tide pulls at water, dragging her nature wide and open, and she could feel her own gift straining hard against the thin and failing tonic. She could feel the whole room too clearly, the small violences of the fire, the slow cooling of a sword on the far wall, and Torin most of all, a banked and complicated warmth she had no business feeling from across a floor. She kept her breathing shallow, she kept her hands folded, still in her lap. She counted the doses behind her ribs, the way another woman might have told a rosary. 2, after she dosed at dawn. 2, and then 2 rounds after that with no cushion left. Here. He had crossed to her without her marking the movement, a cup of water held out in one broad hand. "You have gone pale." She reached for it, and their fingers touched. It was not supposed to happen. She had spent all of her life not letting it happen, because a moonless who touched another skin to skin, with any wall of tonic worn as thin as hers was now, laid herself as open to the other's heart as a lit window lays a room open to the street. For one unguarded instant, through the point where his hand brushed hers, the entire self of Torrin of Duskmare poured into her, and Elowyn nearly dropped the cup. She felt the grey weight of 9 years, spent as the realm's sharpest sword, and never once a man anyone had loved. She felt a loneliness so vast and so patiently borne that he had long ago stopped knowing it was there, the way a man stops hearing a river he has lived beside his whole life. She felt his shame, sharp and present and fresh, at what his own careless words had done to a girl he could not now save. And underneath all of it, unwilling, only just beginning, and aimed with terrible clarity at her, there was a pull. Faint as the first frost of the year on a window pane, but there, unmistakably there. Then he drew his hand back to steady the cup for her, and it ended, and she sat there shaking with a whole tangle of feelings that were not hers to carry, and prayed with everything in her that none of it had shown on her face. "You are afraid," Torrin said quietly, misreading her entirely and mercifully. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, elbows braced on his knees. "You would be a fool not to be. But hear me. When you are out there tomorrow, and it starts to go wrong, and it will go wrong, because everyone's first round goes wrong, do not be proud about it. Yield. I will find some other way to get you whatever it is you truly need. I will swear it before the moon if you want me to. Only live through the morning." He meant it. She had felt that he meant it, felt it from the inside where a person cannot lie, and that was somehow the worst part of all of it, because a cruel man she could have fought clean and slept soundly after. This, she did not know what on earth to do. "Why do you care whether I live?" she asked him. "You had never once laid eyes on me before yesterday." For a long moment, he did not answer. The fire cracked and settled. "I have sent a great many people onto that sand," he said at last, staring into the flames. "I have never once sent one there by accident. I find that I do not care at all for how it sits in me." He almost smiled. "Go and sleep, Maid. You are going to want to hate me thoroughly by the last day, and it will be a great deal easier on you if you begin now." Elowyn went back down to her cell as the moon rode high, and she took out the cracked green vial and measured what was left of her whole life by touch in the dark. Her hands were not quite steady. 2 doses. 2 rounds still to come after the dawn. A first opponent waiting for her twice her size, in front of 12,000 pairs of eyes that would notice absolutely everything. And blooming in her chest where no tonic could reach it, small and cold and forbidden, a wound she already knew would not close. The first fine thread of a bond to the one man in all of Duskmere who could smell exactly what she was. They handed Elowyn a blunted challenger's blade and a jerkin of cracked and second-hand leather and set her at the end of the challenger's line. And the men who did it were laughing while they did it, because everyone loves to watch a thing that is about to be broken open in front of them. Her first opponent was Bran, a shifted wolf half again her weight, and the bookmakers under the arena were not even taking wagers on her. Why would they? A rankless maid against a warrior in his fur. It was not a bout. It was an execution the crowd had bought tickets to see. She had dosed lightly at dawn, after lying awake half the night weighing it, and in the end she had let the tonic run thin, because a thick dose would blind the one thing that could keep her breathing. It meant her true scent was rising. It meant somewhere in these roaring tears a keen enough nose might catch the edge of it. But an exposed moonless was a problem for a tomorrow that might never come, and a dead one had no tomorrows left to worry over. The horn sounded, and Bran came for her like a wall falling, and Elowyn, quite simply, was not where the wall came down. This was the thing no one understood about her kind, the thing that had made the moonless feared enough to hunt to the last. She did not need to be faster than Bran, or stronger. She needed only to know, one clean half-breath, before he knew it himself, exactly where he meant to put his weight. His intent reached her before his body could obey it, a bright hot line drawn on the air, and she read the line and stepped calmly off it, and the great jaws closed on the empty space where her throat had been. He wheeled. She read the wheel, he lunged. She read the lunge before it left his shoulders. To the crowd it looked like witchery, or luck, or a dance, this small, ragged girl drifting untouched through the reach of a monster like smoke he could not close his teeth on, and the laughter that had greeted her began, tear by tear, to curdle into something quieter and far more dangerous. She ended it, the only way she safely could. When exhaustion finally made Bran's intent go sloppy and slow, she slid inside his guard and laid the flat of her blunted blade across the great artery of his throat, and held it there, and the marshal had no choice but to call the yield. The silence that came down after was the loudest thing that Aloan had ever heard. By the second round, the silence had taken on a shape, and the shape was suspicion. She won that one too, against a lean, quick fighter whose intent was harder to read, but which she read all the same. And when she walked off the sand this time, not one soul in the arena was laughing. They watched her the way you watch a serpent that has appeared, impossibly, inside a locked room. How? The whispers ran along the tiers. How is she doing it? And then, because a wolf fears most the thing it cannot name, a worse word began to move hand to hand through the crowd, pass like a stolen coin, unnatural, witch-blooded. There is something wrong with that girl. Something is deeply wrong with her. They were not wrong. That was the thing that turned Eloan's stomach as she sat shaking in the shadow of the challenger's gate. They were not wrong. The woman came for her, that same evening. She wore the ash gray of the king's wardens, the keepers of the bloodline law, and she had the calm, patient face of a person who has watched many people put to death for what they were born, as and slept soundly after. Eloan, she said, as though she were tasting the name to see if it had gone off. I am Warden Sabine. It falls to me to be certain that everything which fights upon the sacred sand is truly what it claims to be. She smiled, and there was no warmth anywhere in it. You understand, there is so much talk. Purely a formality. She leaned in close, and Eloan felt her hunting on the air, that deep and deliberate pull of breath, and forced her own to stay flat and dull and frightened. You will present yourself to me each dawn before your round, and take the measure I give you, and let me look at you properly. The purebred have nothing to fear from a warden, child. A pause. Have they? No, Warden, Eloan said. We shall see about that, said Sabine, and turned and left. It was the worst thing that could have happened, and Eloan understood the whole shape of it at once. To satisfy that nose each dawn, she would have to dose heavily, thick enough to bury her scent, and a thick dose meant a dulled gift, fighting half-blind, losing. To keep her gift sharp, she would have to let the tonic thin, and a thin dose meant Sabine would smell what she was and see her condemned before the week was through. The trap she had lived her whole life inside had just tightened by half, with no room left to breathe. She went up to the vigil that night with the whole weight of it sitting on her chest, and she was so lost inside her own counting that she nearly walked straight past the two men talking low in the gallery above the champion's wing. She would not have stopped, except that she heard Torrhen's name. She pressed herself back into the dark of the stairwell and listened, and the voice that answered was one she knew at once. Warm and unhurried, and terribly pleased with itself. I never expected the little animal to win a single bout, no, he was saying. But do you not see how much better this is? Let her keep winning. Let all of Duskmere watch a rankless scullion make a fool of our undefeated champion, round after round. And should the impossible happen, should she crawl to the last day and beat him, why, then our beloved Beta is bound by his own sworn word to wed a nameless nothing. And a Beta wed to a nothing commands nothing. His voice in council, gone. The one wolf in this whole realm that the pack's whisper should have worn the crown in my place. Undone, ruined, and I never once had to so much as lift a blade against him. The pleasure in his voice had gone thick and obscene. My uncle dotes on him. The people love him. But no one, cousin, has ever loved a joke. And I have made the man a joke. The other man murmured something Eloin could not quite catch. Oh, the girl, Varian said, and his voice went idle, went easy, the exact tone a man uses to discuss the weather, or the drowning of a stray. If she climbs too high, if it should start to look as though she might truly take the day, then no, we cannot have her actually win the thing. That would spoil the whole design. See to it that she has an accident before the final round. Something with a clean and natural face on it. The sand is a dangerous place. Everyone knows that. Eloin stood in the dark with her heart slamming against the cracked green vial, and understood, all at once, three things she could never again unknow. That she had been a weapon aimed at Torin's throat from the first laughing word. That the man she was bound to was hated by the heir for the crime of being better than him. And that whether she won or lost, Varian had already decided, in that easy-weather voice, that she would not leave this proving alive. She meant to tell him. She had decided it there on the stair in the dark, with Varian's idle-weather voice still crawling on her skin. She would break every rule of a lifetime spent trusting no one, and she would tell Torin exactly what she had heard, because whatever he was or was not to her, he did not deserve to be undone by his own blood, without so much as knowing the truth had already been decided. It was, she would think later, the most foolish and the most honest thing she had ever tried to do. The vigil chamber was warm and firelit, and Torin was already there when a steward let her in, and he looked up at her, and for one unguarded moment, before either of them remembered to armor themselves against the other, something passed between them across that warm room that had no name and needed none. She had been feeling it grow for 4 nights now, this quiet pull beneath her ribs, this awful tender awareness of exactly where, in any room he happened to be standing, the bond. Small and cold and forbidden and entirely beyond her power to stop or slow. She could feel his weariness from clear across the floor, and underneath it that same faint frost-bright thing aimed back at her, and she had stopped, somewhere in the last 2 nights, being able to tell herself that she had imagined any of it. I heard something tonight, she said, and you need to hear it too. And she told him, Varian, the gallery, the whole cold, clever shape of the plan, the wager as a blade aimed at his own throat. The order, in that easy voice, for her accident before the final round. All of it, quickly and quietly, watching his face, and she let the thinned edge of her gift stay open, so she could feel it land, so she could feel him understand that she was on his side, that she had come straight to him, that out of the whole treacherous court she had chosen him. She felt none of the things she had expected to feel. What she felt, rising off him steadily as she spoke, was fear, not for himself, for her, a great cold flooding tide of it. And then, deliberately, and terribly, and right there in front of her open eyes, she felt him take hold of that fear and lock it away behind a heavy door inside himself, and turn, between one breath and the next, into someone else entirely. You will not repeat one word of that, Torin said. His voice had gone flat and hard as the packed sand itself. Not to me, not to anyone, not ever. Do you have any idea at all what you are? A rankless maid, standing in the beta's own chambers whispering treason against the heir to the throne. You have no name, no house, no living soul anywhere in this world to speak a word for you. If Varian so much as suspected that you had overheard him tonight, you would be dead before the next dawn broke, and no marshal in Greyspire would trouble himself to ask how it had happened. He stood, and he made himself large, and he built himself deliberately into a wall between the two of them, and she could feel with sick clarity how carefully he was doing it. I did not ask for your loyalty. I do not want it. You have made yourself trouble enough for me already. Fight your rounds, keep your mouth shut and your eyes down, and stop looking at me as though there is something between us. Because there is nothing between us, girl. There is a wager, and there is a week, and then, one way or the other, you will be gone out of my life for good. See that you go quietly, when you go. Every single word was a stone, and he set them all down between them one at a time, with a terrible and deliberate care. And here, at last, was the true cruelty of the gift she had been cursed with at 6 years old. She could feel that he was lying. She could feel the fear and the tenderness both screaming behind the wall that he was building. Could feel exactly how much each cold stone cost him to lift and set in place. She knew, with the bone-deep certainty of her blood, that he was doing this only to drive her away toward some kind of safety, that shoving her back was the single shield a hated man could think to raise over a girl he had no other way to protect. She knew it, and she could not make herself believe it. That was the thing 21 years of being despised had done to the inside of her. It had worn a groove so deep that when a man stood over her and told her she was nothing, some old broken part of her simply agreed, quietly, and drowned out everything her gift was trying to tell her. Of course, the old groove whispered. Of course, there is nothing at all between you. What on earth did you imagine? You are a scullion who smells of lie, and he is the 4 times champion of Duskmare. You felt a bond, because you have been lonely your whole life, and you wanted, so badly, for one to be there. You made it up out of nothing. You always make it up. Forgive me, Beta, Eloan said, and her voice did not shake, and she was fiercely proud of that. At least, I will not trouble you again. She turned, and she walked out, and she did not let herself run until the heavy door was shut behind her. Down in her cell, she took out the vial and measured what remained by touch, and her hands, this time, were perfectly steady, doing it because she had decided something out there in the corridor, and a cold decision steadies the hands. 1 dose. 1 dose of tonic left to her name, and 2 rounds still ahead of her to fight the next one and the final one, and a warden waiting at the gate who would smell the truth off her the instant the mask thinned, and an heir who had already ordered her quietly killed, and no one, not one soul in all the wide world standing anywhere at her back. Good, she told herself, and she nearly believed it. Alone is what you have always known. Alone, at least, you have never once been betrayed. She would win this thing herself, or die on that sand herself, and she would not look at Torin's face again, while she did. Emrys had days now, only days. The bond throbbed steadily in her chest, like a wound she flatly refused to look down at. And outside her small window the moon climbed, cold and indifferent to all of it, up toward the morning that would take her very last dose from her for good. The 3rd round fell on the day the trap closed its jaws. Warden Sabine was waiting at the Challenger's gate before dawn, gray and patient as a gravestone, and there was no thinning the tonic now, not with that nose hunting a hand's breadth from Eloan's throat. So Eloan drank the last dose whole. She felt it go down, cold and final, felt it draw a heavy gray blanket over the bright hot world of intent she lived inside, felt her gift dim to almost nothing, the way a snuffed candle dims a room. Sabine breathed her in, long and slow and deep, and found only a frightened maid who smelled of lie and old ash and fear, and stepped back at last, looking faintly, genuinely disappointed. Perhaps I was wrong about you after all, the warden said. Perhaps you were, said Eloan, and walked out onto the sand half-blind. She knew within 10 heartbeats that this round was not like the others. Her opponent was a wolf called Hesk, and there was nothing at all of sport anywhere in him. His intent, what little of it she could read through the thick gray fog of the tonic, was not to beat her or to draw her blood and win the yield. It was to end her, and the blade in his hand caught the light with a sick bluish sheen along its edge, silver and something dark and oiled beneath it that she knew at once, from a childhood spent hiding from such things, was wolfsbane. A wound from that would not close. To a wolf it meant the long fever and the slow dying, or the loss of the wolf forever. This was the accident that Varian had promised in his easy voice. Clean, natural, and she could not see it coming. That was the true horror of it. The one dose that had kept the warden off her throat, now keeping her from the only defense she had. Hess came in low and fast, and she read the strike a half-breath too late, far too late, and she got her blunted blade up, and it was not enough. It was going to open her from hip to heart, and there was no time, there was no time. Someone was there. The roar of the crowd changed pitch all at once, from bloodlust to a single vast, indrawn breath, because a shape had come over the barrier that no shape was ever permitted to cross. To set foot on the sacred sand during another's bout was the oldest broken law of the proving, forfeit and ruin, for anyone who did it. Champion or commoner or king. Torin did not hesitate for the length of a single stride. He came in between Elowen and the silver blade, with his arms open wide and nothing at all in his hands, and the strike that had been meant to open her opened him instead. A long, bright line drawn across his ribs, the wolfsbane going into him, black and certain. And Elowen felt it, felt the poison bite through the fading bond, like a scream torn out of her own flesh. He did not fall at once. That was nearly the worst of it. He turned, with the black already climbing the veins of his throat, and put his whole body between her and Hesk, and the roaring world. And only when Hesk had stumbled back in raw terror of what he had done, did Torin's knees fold. He went down the way a great old tree goes down slowly, and then, all at once, into the churned red sand. No, Elowen said. The gray blanket of the tonic tore straight down the middle. Her gift ripped itself back open all at once, and she felt everything, all of it, the packed and screaming tears, the marshal's shock, the sudden sharp swing of Sabine's attention toward the fallen champion, and the girl beside him, and Torin most of all, his agony pouring raw and unshielded straight into her through the wide open bond. Because he had no strength left anywhere in him now to hold up a wall. She was on her knees in the blood before she knew that she had moved, both hands pressed to the sides of his face. His eyes found hers. There was already so much black swimming in them, told you, he breathed, and tried to smile up at her, and could not quite manage it. Told you to hate me by now. You broke the law, she said, and her own voice was breaking clean through with it. You great idiot. You have forfeit everything you have. Everything. Why would you? Could not watch it, Torin said, very simply, as the poison dragged his voice down to almost nothing. Turns out, could not. His hand found her wrist and closed weakly around it, and through that single point of contact, the truth he had spent 5 long nights walling away came flooding into her all at once, undeniable, drowning. Not nothing, never nothing, you were never once nothing to me. And then his grip went slack against her skin, and his eyes rolled up white, and the 4 times champion of Duskmere lay still and black-veined in the churned sand, with a rankless maid's hands pressed uselessly to a wound that would not close. None of them knew what to do. The healers who came running had faces gone gray at the black spreading under his skin, and Elowen heard the word wolfsbane pass mouth to mouth, and the other word, chasing it, that a champion had broken the first law of the proving, and would answer for it if he lived. She did not let go of him. When they lifted him to carry him from the sand, she went too, one hand locked around his slack fingers, and no marshal in that stunned and roaring place found the nerve to pry her off. And somewhere high above them, all in the roaring dark of the crowd, Elowen felt one cold and quiet point of pleasure, patient and unhurried, and deeply, deeply pleased with the morning's work. She looked up. She found it without even trying. Varian was smiling down at the both of them. They wanted to take him away from her, and Elowen would not let them. It was the wager bond that won her the right to it, in the end. She stood in the churned red sand, with Torrin's black-veined head cradled in her lap, and she threw back at them the one piece of law she had memorized against exactly such a moment that a challenger bound to a champion by a sworn wager held the ancient right to tend him in his hurt, and that any hand laid upon him against that right was a hand laid against the sacred proving itself. Half of it she was inventing on the spot. But she said it the way Sabine said things, calm and certain and cold as stone, and a marshal who badly did not want to be the man who had guessed wrong in front of 12,000 witnesses let her have him. They carried Torrin down to a low stone cell beneath the champion's wing, and Aloin followed every step of the way, and when the last of them had finally gone, she barred the heavy door with her own body, and turned to look at what she had to save. The wolfsbane was already well past his ribs. She could see the black lines of it reaching up the side of his throat and down toward his heart, and she could feel it too, now that the last of the tonic had torn out of her blood entirely, a low, poisonous roar of wrongness pouring off him through the raw and wide-open bond. He would be dead by moonrise. Any healer in all of Duskmere would have told her exactly that, and packed the wound with what herbs they had, and let him die clean and quiet. But Aloin was not a healer, and she was not of Duskmere, and she was the last living daughter of a people the whole world had murdered, precisely, exactly, for what they could do. She had never once tried it on anything larger than a bird. Her mother had shown her the way of it once, before the end, cupping a broken sparrow into Aloin's small, cold hands, and teaching her to find the door inside herself and open it, and let the creature's hurt come through it, and into her own body where a moonless could hold what would kill any other living thing. "We are not healers, my heart," her mother had said to her, in a voice Aloin could still hear, on the bad nights. "We cannot mend a single thing, we can only carry. We take the pain into ourselves, and we bear it, because we were made, you and I, to bear the things that nothing else on this earth can bear." It had cost Aloin 3 full days of fever. That one time, for one sparrow's, one broken wing. She did not let herself stop and think about what a grown man's dying might cost her. She only knelt down over him, and laid both of her bare hands flat against the black spreading wound above his heart, and opened the door. The poison came into her like swallowed fire. She had known it would hurt. She had not known it would be like this, like drinking the sun down in one draught, every nerve she owned drawn into a single wire of white agony at once. She bit clean through her own lip to keep from screaming and bringing the marshals back down on her, and she held it. That was all of the gift. In the end, the terrible and simple whole of it. She held what should have killed him. She drew it out of his blood one burning thread at a time and into her own, and she bore it, because she had been made to bear the things that nothing else could. The black lines in his throat began, very slowly, thread by thread, to fade. She worked all through the night. The moon rode high outside the barred window and pulled her nature wide open, and the small cell must have blazed with the scent of what she truly was to anything, with a nose, but no one came, and by that hour she was far past caring. Somewhere near the deepest part of the dark, when she was shaking so hard that she could barely keep her hands pressed flat against him, Torrin's eyes came open. They were unfocused, fever-bright, seeing something that was not the cell. He looked up at her, and his cracked lips moved, and the word he breathed stopped her heart more surely than any poison. "Moonless," he whispered. Aloin went utterly perfectly still. "Do not," he breathed, and his hand came up and closed weakly around her wrist, and he was not seeing her. He was seeing some ghost the fever had dredged up from the bottom of him. "Do not let them. Run, little one, run. I cannot do it again. I will not." His whole face twisted with a grief so old and so enormous that it came through the bond and nearly drowned her where she knelt. "Forgive me," he said to someone who was not in the room. "Forgive me." I did not know. I swear to you, I did not know what you were." And then the fever pulled him back down under, and his hand slid slack off her wrist, and Eloan knelt frozen in the dark with his poison burning through her own veins, and one impossible fact ringing over and over in her skull. He knew what she was. He had known, perhaps since that first dark corridor. And somewhere in the ruins of his past there was a moonless he had failed to save, and a grief for it he had been carrying every bit as long as she had carried her mother's, and a secret buried in him every bit as deadly as her own. By the gray before dawn, the black was gone from his skin, and his breathing had steadied, and Eloan understood that he was going to live. She should have felt nothing but relief. Instead, she sat with her aching back against the cold stone, and felt the last thing she had expected to feel, the thing that frightened her more than Sabine, more than Varian, more than the whole sand. The bond had deepened while she poured her own life down into him, to keep him. She could feel him now, without touching him, a steady, low warmth, just beneath her own skin. Constant humming, there. And she knew, with the cold certainty of her blood, exactly what that meant. A moonless bond, once it ran this deep, did not stay hidden. It would finish, it would complete itself, and when it did, it would show, plain to any warden's eye, a thing not seen in Duskmere since the Purge. A mark that meant nothing but her death. She had saved his life through the night, and in the saving of it, she had started something that was going to cost her her own. The king suspended the proving for 7 days. He did it. Eloan would understand only later, for a dozen tangled reasons of his own. But the face he put on it was mercy. An outlawed weapon had been drawn on the sacred sand. A champion lay poisoned near death. The whole rite had been fouled before the realm, and the crown, Aldrich declared, required time to weigh it. Hesk vanished into a cell, and would not speak the name of whoever had armed him, though every soul with sense already knew. Varian walked the court wearing his outrage like a fine coat, loudly demanding that the witch-maid be examined, and the disgraced Beta be tried for breaking the first law of the proving, and getting, to his visible fury, neither. And Torin, too weak yet even to stand, stripped of his command and his standing, and left with nothing at all but his life, was sent out of the city to convalesce somewhere he could do no further damage to anyone's careful schemes. They sent him to his mother's house. It stood 2 hours north of Greyspire, a long low manor gone gently to seed, ivy thick in the gutters and the gardens run wild and sweet, and by the wager bond that still chained them Eloan went with him, because the law that had bound her to a stranger now bound her to the only living person she trusted. For 7 whole days, the world could not reach them. And those 7 days were the strangest and best of Eloan's life. He could not shift. That was the price the wolfsbane had taken from him, and it had taken it whole and entire. On the 3rd day, when he was strong enough to try, he went out alone into the wild garden at dusk, and Eloan felt through the bond the exact moment he reached down inside himself for the wolf that had lived in him every day of his life, and found only silence. She felt the thing break clean in half. Inside him, she went out and found him down on his knees in the long wet grass. This enormous man, the 4 times champion of Duskmere, weeping without any sound at all, because the wolf would not answer him and never would again. "They will call me rankless now," he said, when at last he could speak. He laughed, and it was an awful and broken sound to hear. "Do you know what I said to you? That first day, up in the box, a wolf who cannot even wolf. I stood up there and I let Varian and I. He pressed the heels of both hands hard against his eyes. I am the exact thing that I let a prince mock a girl to her face for being. I have been given, to the letter, precisely what I earned." And Eloan, who had been that exact thing every day of her life, knelt down in the wet grass beside the man who had just become it, and gave him the one gift no living soul had ever thought to give her. "It is not lesser," she said. "Do you hear me, Torin, what you are now? It is not one thread lesser than what you were. I have lived my whole life on the far side of that word, rankless, and I promise you, there is a whole world over here, and it is not the smaller one. She took his hands down away from his face and made him look at her. You are not the thing they took from you. You never once were. Something changed in him then. She felt it move through the bond, a slow loosening, as though some hard knot he had been carrying, tied up inside him for years, had begun, at long last, to give. The days that followed were quiet and golden and slow. She could not mend his wolf, but there were smaller things she could do. She found his forfeited champion's blade where the marshals had thrown it aside, and cleaned it and oiled it and put it back in his hands, and told him a sword did not care what rank of man held it. She walked him through the overgrown orchard when his strength allowed, and let him lean on her when it failed, and neither of them spoke of how often, now, they found reasons to touch. And in the warm evenings, because a moonless is strongest of all after moonrise, and because she had decided somewhere along the way that she was finished being afraid every hour of every day, she began, very carefully, to teach him her own way of seeing the world. Not naming it, never once saying the word, only showing him how to go still and quiet, and let the small signs of a thing come to him, the shift of a bird before it startles, the change in a room a breath before the door opens. He was a soldier to the bone. He learned fast, and he never once asked how a scullery maid had come to know such things, and she loved him a little more for every question he chose not to ask. She told him about Emerus on the 5th night. She had not meant to, but he asked her, gently, over the low-banked fire, what it truly was she had come to the proving to win, and the truth of it had been sitting so long behind her teeth that it simply came out of her all at once. Her little brother, 11 years old, condemned to die for a theft that had been hers and never his, taking the blame the way small brothers do, because she had taught him, without meaning to, that the world was safer when it did not look too closely at either of them. The boon, the one mercy the champion of the proving could claim, that even a king was bound by law to grant. That was the why of all of it. That had always been the why. Not glory, not marriage. A small boy in a cold cell, with the sand in an hourglass, running out beneath him. Torrin was quiet for a long time after she finished. "Den, we will get him out," he said. "Not you, we." And through the bond, she felt that he meant it with all of his broken heart. "There is more that I cannot tell you," she said, because she owed him at least the honest shape of the wall standing between them. "Things about me. Things about what I am. If I told you, it could cost the both of us everything there is. I need you to not ask me." He looked at her across the fire for a long moment, and she braced for the questions. And they did not come. "Then I will not ask," Torrin said simply. "You will tell me when it is yours to tell. Or, you never will, and I will love you anyway." It was the first time either of them had said the word aloud, and neither flinched from it, and outside the wide window, the moon rose slow over the wild garden, and the bond between them glowed steady and warm, and though Eloin would not let herself look straight at it, one fatal degree brighter than the night before. On the 7th morning, the summons came, sealed in black wax, and it undid all of that hard-won peace in a single written line. The proving would resume in 2 days' time. Eloin had won her way through to the final round by Hesk's disgrace and disqualification. And her opponent in that last round, standing as the champion of the crown itself in the disgraced Beta's place, claiming the right, by his royal blood, would be Prince Varian of Duskmere. And at first, light on the morning after the final, the boy Emrys would face the sentence. Everything she had come to love, and everything she had ever feared, all of it at once, funneling down now to a single square of open sand and a single rising sun. She learned all of Torrin's secret on the last night before they rode back. She had not meant to force it, but the summons had cracked something open in him, and after the house had gone dark, he came to find her, and she felt him through the bond long before he reached her door, the dread in him, and the resolve, and the awful thing he had decided to do. He sat down across the fire and would not meet her eyes, and said, "Before we go back, you have to know what I am. And after you know it, if you want me only to help you save your brother, and then never look at my face again, I will understand. It is no more than I have earned." And then Torin, Beta of Duskmere, told her the way he had murdered her people. He had been 19. The old king, Aldrich's own father, had named the Moonless a plague on the clean blood of the packs, unnatural things that read honest men's hearts and stole the pain out of dying ones. And he had handed his sharpest young blade a list of the quiet places they hid. Torin had believed him. That was the part he could never forgive, he said, not the being ordered but the believing, that he had ridden out proud and glad to cleanse the realm of monsters. He had found them in the hills. And he had found not monsters but families, and healers, and the old and the frightened, none of whom could fight back, because their gift had never been for fighting, only for feeling. And he had done what he was sent to do, to nearly all of them, before the thing buried in him rose up and refused. There was a girl, he said, and Eloan already knew. She had known since the fever. The last of one of the families. I had my blade up over her, and she looked at me, not afraid, only sad. For me, she could feel what the doing of it was doing to me, even then, even at the end, and she was sorry for it. His voice broke apart. I let her run. I told the old king she had died with the rest. I have spent 11 years, not knowing whether she lived a single day, past that hillside. He finally looked up at her, and his eyes were wet and old past counting. And then, a rankless maid stepped onto my arena, and I caught the edge of her scent in a dark corridor. And I knew what you were, before you had said 10 words to me. And I have spent every hour since trying to keep this realm from doing to you what I already did with my own 2 hands to everyone like you. That is the why of the wager, and of my pushing you away, and of my being willing to die on that sand rather than watch the wardens take one more Moonless while I did nothing. Not because I am good alone, because I am guilty. Do you understand the difference? You of all people should. Eloan sat with all of it crashing down over her at once, and it was so much larger than she had any way to hold. He had killed her mother's people. The safe thing was to feel nothing but the horror of it, take his help for Emrys, and never look at his face again. But she was moonless, and that was the curse of it, and the gift of it both. She could not lie to herself about what a heart held, and his was pouring straight through the open bond, raw and unshielded, and it held no murderer's satisfaction anywhere in it. It held 11 years of penance that had hollowed a man to a shell. It held the boy of 19, who had believed a powerful man's lie. It held a grief for her vanished people nearly as deep and wide as her own. "You want me to hate you," she said slowly. "You have wanted it since the first night. You keep telling me to. Because if I hate you, then the world makes sense again. And you get to go back to being the man who deserves nothing." Torin said nothing, but through the bond, she felt the arrow strike home. "I will not," she said. "I am sorry. I know it would be easier on you. I will not." She stood, because she could not say the next part sitting down. "You were 19, and powerful men lied to you, and you believed them, and it broke you so badly you have spent 11 years since trying to die of it by inches. That is not the same as being evil, Torin. I have felt true evil. I felt it in that gallery, in Varian's own voice, when he spoke of killing me the way another man speaks of the weather. That is not what lives inside of you." Her own eyes were streaming now, and she let them. "What lives inside of you is the reason you are the only person in 21 years that I have not once had to hide from." He broke then, completely, and she went to him. And for a long while, there were no words between them, only 2 hunted people, holding hard onto the single safe thing each had found in the wreck of the world. But he would not let it end there. Even ruined, even held, the soldier in him was already trying to save her the only way he knew how. "Then let me do one last thing," he said against her hair. Tomorrow, do not fight him. You will have to use all of what you are, in the open, in front of the whole realm and the wardens, and the instant you do, they will know, and they will kill you for it. I have watched it happen once. I cannot watch it take you too. Run tonight. Take the horse and go. I will find another way to reach the boy, I swear it. Go and live, and let me, at the last, be the one thing I have left to be, the man who finally kept a moonless safe. And there it was, laid out plain between them, the sensible path, the safe one, offered to her out of pure love, exactly as everything in her whole broken past was telling her to reach out and take it. Aloan pulled back and looked at the man who wanted so badly to sacrifice himself so she could disappear into the dark and be safe, and made her choice. No, she said. I am done hiding what I am. I have hidden it every hour of every day of my whole life, and it has cost me everything and everyone, and tomorrow it will cost my brother his last sunrise, if I run from it now. She wiped her face. I am going to walk onto that sand, as exactly what I was born as, in front of every one of them. And I am going to beat that smiling monster, and I am going to buy my brother his life. And if they take my life after, then they take it. But I will not spend one more day of the life I have left, pretending to be less than I was born. She took his face, gently between both hands. You have spent 11 years wishing you had been braver at the end, for one moonless girl on a hillside. Well, here is another one, standing right in front of you. Be brave with me instead. Torrens stared up at her, and something in his ruined face that had lain dead for 11 years came, slowly and terribly and beautifully, back to life. All right, he said, then we do not run. Then we bring the whole rotten thing down together. Outside the last night before the final drew its dark down soft over the house of his mother, and neither slept a moment of it, and neither was afraid, and the bond between them glowed so bright by dawn that it could no longer honestly be called a hidden thing. She took no tonic. There was none left to take, and she would not have taken it now, if there had been. Aloan walked onto the sand of the Greyspire arena, in the full open blaze of what she was, and for the first time in her life, she did not dull it, or bury it, or fold herself small around it. She let it open all the way, and the world came pouring in, 12,000 hearts at once, the king grave upon his high seat, Warden Sabine already rising with her nostrils flared and her mouth opening to name what she smelled, and across the raked sand, smiling in gilded armor, Prince Varian of Duskmere. Come to kiss a scullery maid before a cheering realm and call it sport. He did not yet know what he was fighting. He found out in the first pass. Varian was fast and trained and vicious, and none of it mattered in the slightest. Because Aloan could feel his every intention the instant it was born, a clean half-breath before his body could obey it. He struck, and she was not there. He feinted, and she read the true strike hidden underneath the feint. He was a magnificent wolf, and she was the one thing his people had hunted to extinction, precisely because no wolf could ever lay a hand on it. And on the honest sand, with nothing hidden, the truth of that grew suddenly clear to every soul in the arena. The great roar of the crowd died into an eerie, mounting hush. Varian's beautiful face began to change, the confidence, curdling exactly the way it had that first morning, first into fury, and then, at the last, into something Aloan had never thought to see on it, fear. Which, Sabine's voice rang out across the whole silent arena. Moonless, she is moonless majesty. I have named it before you all. The abomination fights upon the sacred sand. I know what she is, said King Aldrich, and he did not rise, and his voice carried across the sand like a drawn blade. Finish it, girl, and then we will speak of what you are. So, she finished it. She let Varian spend himself against a shadow he could never catch, and when his intent frayed to gasping desperation, she stepped inside his guard the way she had inside Bran's a lifetime ago, and put the crown prince of Duskmere flat on his back, with her blunted blade across the great artery of his throat. And the heir to the throne lay beneath a rankless maid, while 12,000 wolves looked down and made no sound. "Yield," she said, very quietly. So only he could hear. "Or do not. I have felt your heart, Varian. I know exactly how much you want to go on living. Yield." He yielded. She heard the marshal's cry go up, small and shocked. And it was over, and she had won the proving, and the wish she had come here to bleed for was hers at last. And then, of course, it turned to ash in her hands, exactly the way she had always known it would. "Warden Sabine has named you correctly," Aldrich said into the ringing quiet, as Aloan rose up off the fallen prince. "You are moonless. And the law of this realm, written by my own father's hand, is that the moonless are put to death." He let that settle over the arena, like the first snow of the year. "You have won yourself a champion's boon, which by 400 years of law even I cannot refuse you, and you stand condemned by a law that I cannot unmake upon a whim." His gray eyes came to rest, hard and level, on her. "You have one mercy to claim, girl, and you have earned it fairly, so claim it wisely. Claim it for yourself." There it was. The whole arena understood it at once, and leaned in as one creature. The maid had one wish that not even a king could deny, and she could spend it to save her own life. Anyone would. Every soul in that place waited for her too. "No," Eloin said. She turned from the king and faced the high stone wall of the eastern cells, where she knew, because she could feel him beating there, one small frightened heart. "I claim my brother's life," she said, loud enough for all of Duskmere to hear. "Emrys, condemned to die at dawn tomorrow. I spend my one mercy on him. Free him. Pardon him. Let the boy grow up. That is my boon, and I am told that a king is bound by his own law and cannot refuse it." Her voice did not break, though all of her was breaking. "And as for me, so be it. I came here to buy his life, not my own. I always knew the price. I am content to pay it." The silence after that was a different silence than the one before. She felt it move through the packed tears, 12,000 hard hearts confronted at once with a monster who had just spent her single road out of the flames on a child in a cell. And into that silence walked Torin. He came onto the sand a second time in a week, disgraced and wolfless and unforgivable and without fear, and crossed to Aloin's side and turned to face his uncle and his king. "Before you light anything," Torin said, "you will hear the truth this realm was built on, and then do whatever your conscience allows, because I am finished living inside the lie of it." And he told them all of it. The purge, the old king's list, the families and healers who could not fight back, the slander a young blade had believed, that the moonless had never been monsters, only the gentlest of Duskmere's own, murdered in cold blood and called purity, and that he had been the sword that did it, and had spent 11 years dying of the shame. "This girl," he said, "took the poison out of my blood with her bare hands, and held it in her own body, and asked for nothing. That is what a moonless is. That is the thing my father's father taught us to destroy." He drew one long breath. "She is my mate. The bond is formed and witnessed, and any one of you may see it if you care to look. Take her life, and you take mine with it. I will not watch it happen a second time. I would sooner be in it with her." Aloin felt the bond flare open between them, visible now, undeniable, blazing into the air for 12,000 wolves to witness, a thing not seen in the realm for a generation. And she felt that he meant every word, that he would truly walk into the flames at her side, and that for the first time in 11 years the man was not trying to die, he was trying at last to live, and only if she lived too. King Aldrich looked for a long moment at his ruined nephew, and at his fallen son, groaning in the sand, and at the moonless girl who had spent her one mercy on a child, rather than herself. He was a hard man, who had held a hard throne through 2 wars by knowing which laws to keep and which to let die, and Eloin, reading him now, felt the instant the old lie grew too heavy for even a hard practical man to carry. "My father," Aldrich said slowly, "was wrong about a great many things in his time. It would seem that this was the largest of them." He rose at last, up onto his feet. Prince Varian drew a silver blade envenomed with wolfsbane upon the sacred sand. He armed the wolf husk to murder a lawful challenger. He conspired against the crown's own beta. There are witnesses enough in this arena to condemn him 3 times over, and there is no boon protecting him. Varian's face went white as bone. "Take him." Guards moved in from the barrier. "The bloodline law dies today, struck from the rolls by my own hand, as it should have died a generation ago. The moonless are no plague. They are owed a debt. This crown will spend the rest of my reign only beginning to repay." His gray gaze came at last to rest upon the two of them, standing together in the blood and the hard morning light. "The boy is freed. The mate bond is recognized before the crown. And the two of you," and he almost smiled, "have made the most memorable proving in 400 years. Go home, both of you. You have earned the peace of it." The roar that went up then was not the roar that had greeted a maid with a pitcher of warm wine a lifetime ago. It was something else. Eloan turned to Torin, looking at her the way he had across a firelit room 100 years before, and she stopped hiding at last and let the bond fill her. Love and grief and relief and a real future, pouring both ways at once. "You were meant to be brave with me," she said, half laughing and half weeping up at him. "Not braver than me." "I learned it from a maid," Torin said, and he pulled her in and he kissed her in front of the whole staring world, and this time neither one of them ran from the rising of the sun. They came back to Greyspire the following spring, because there was a wedding to attend at last, and this time the wedding was their own. The same court that had once whispered unnatural and witch-blooded now bowed low as she passed, because a court is a weather vane, and always has been, and Eloan let them bow, and felt no need to make a single one of them pay for any of it. Living was payment enough. She had learned that from a man who had spent 11 years punishing himself and gotten nothing back but ruin, and she had decided the two of them had done more than enough bleeding to last a lifetime. Emrys was there, 11 years old and gap-toothed, and alive, tearing in wild circles across the tangled garden of a house that was theirs now, the old manor going less to seed with every passing month under Torin's patient hands. He would grow up. That plain and enormous fact still undid her some mornings. And there was one more thing besides. The thing that made the whole crowded hall gasp aloud at the wedding feast. The thing that every healer in Duskmere had sworn on their lives was flatly impossible. On the night the bond had first blazed open on the sand, something had begun to mend in Torin that no medicine could reach. Eloan had felt it across the slow turning of the months, a warmth returning by inches to a place that had gone dark and silent, and she had said nothing, too afraid of the hoping. But on the morning of their wedding, in the gray hush before the dawn, Torin had walked out alone into the wild garden and reached down deep inside himself, and this time, the wolf had answered him. He shifted in the middle of the feast, laughing helplessly, unable to hold it back a moment longer. The 4 times champion of Duskmere made whole again in front of them all, and the great hall erupted around him. And Eloan watched the great dark wolf that the realm's own hatred had once tried to destroy turn 3 delighted circles on the flagstones, and understood at last the shape of the thing. Her love had mended the wound their hatred had torn open. The gift they had hunted her people to death for was the same gift that had just handed Duskmere back its champion whole. Let them make of that whatever lesson they could bear. They had each of them been no one's first choice, a maid too, broken ever to be a proper wolf, a champion who had become one. 2 hunted and hollowed out people that the world had thrown away, and then thrown together by one cruel man's careless, laughing joke, and out of all of it, in the end, they had simply chosen each other. That was all of it. That was everything there was. By sundown, they slipped away from the feast, up onto the old walls, and stood side by side, watching the light go gold, then amber, then a deep burning red across the kingdom that had tried so hard to destroy them both. Torrhen's hand found hers, warm and sure, and through it she felt exactly what he felt. And for once it was nothing complicated. It was only peace. And that is where I will leave Eloin and Torrhen, watching the sun go down over Duskmere. Here is what I keep turning over, though, and I would love to hear your side of it. Torrhen knew what Eloin was almost from the start, and he knew what he had done to her people, and he chose to carry it alone, rather than tell her. Was he protecting her, the way he believed, or did he owe her the truth, from the first night? And if you had been Eloin, standing on that sand, with the man who had hunted your family reaching for your hand, could you have forgiven him the way she did? Let me know in the comments. I read every one. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you in the next story.